Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Matt's waving, although this is a podcast. However, the YouTube views have gone up. So it's cool to see that people are watching the videos, and perhaps this will entice you to watch today's video. Now, Matt has made a decision this morning. He's currently wearing a, what do you call it?
Rather fetching kimono piece.
Kimono. Now, we live in Thailand, of course, and we actually purchased this before Thailand because I was like, wow, this is great with the tattoos, etc. But he also has a rave top, which is a bit of a Gucci vibe.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, our subject today is nutrition.
Not my t-shirt choice.
And what we're going to cover is relatable to the t-shirts because nutrition is interchangeable depending on your goal, but also if your life changes, because we're certainly set in ways where we buy into a protocol or a goal, and then we can be quite scared to come away from that or pressured to not come away from that. And Matt's actually done some posts talking about his recent changes of how you view bodybuilding and what that brings you in life. Now, because it's nutrition based, perhaps you could talk about your changes in your own nutrition and the focuses and how that aligns with what your goals are now.
Yeah, for sure. I've changed my nutrition multiple times as we do over the course of our lifting, physique development journey side of things. And a large part of that has been not just building my understanding of food, but also my relationship with food. And this is a big part of being tied into a thought process or mythology around nutrition. And you find, because people are quite tribal, they like camps, it's where, religion, groups, even music, all of these things, it's like, I like this kind of music, and therefore I like these kind of people. It's the same in terms of nutrition. So I started off not knowing anything about nutrition. And then, of course, when you get into bodybuilding, you become a chicken, rice, and broccoli disciple. So when that happens, you believe that there are no other nutritional pathways other than the holy grails of the holy trinity of chicken, rice, and broccoli. And then I transitioned into if it fits your macros, which was through a coaching process. And there wasn't much other than basically, these are your calories and these are your macros. You can eat whatever you like in that.
What did that bring about for you, though?
Well, that unearthed everything apart from chicken, rice, and broccoli to become an option. So then you start looking at, well, I get my protein from some milk. So therefore I can have milk and cereal. Cereal has protein in. And then you go back to those kind of hedonistic things because you don't realize how much you miss something or you haven't had something when you've got blinkers on and you're just so focused on, well, I go to the butcher's, I get my chicken, I buy 20 kilos of rice or 20 packets of microwave rice if you're kind of lazy like me, or like the lazy crew.
I've just cooked some fresh rice, but anyway.
Yeah, because microwave rice is out now because the rains have been taken away. So this was kind of the thought process, and that then led down the route of really struggling to identify what I should be eating versus what I wanted to eat. And there wasn't much guidance off the back of that. And that caused me to feel almost quite torn between what I was doing and quite lost, and also not wanting to give up what I'd now found as to the fact that I could eat what I wanted, or so I thought, but also wanting the results that I could attribute from having consistent nutrition, because you could track it a lot easier. You could see the fluctuations a lot easier, as opposed to now being able to go out for meals and try and roughly track them as best as you could, up until the point of then flex in between. And this is a big part of nutrition, is realizing that you learn a set of skills, which is tracking, food awareness, all of these kind of things. And actually you can push and pull these things in and out. So I've done diets where I've put myself back into very strict set of circumstances, but through choice, because it's easier to manage those things. And then over a time of having free meals or cheat meals or whatever you want to call them, periods of time where you're not tracking, but you're aware of your food. And this is where putting mindfulness back in and really thinking, well, do I want that food, or am I told that I should want that food and actually just have that food because it's something that everyone else is doing? And therefore that makes me more of a bodybuilder, or that makes me more of someone who's into physique development because I can copy the Rock's cheat day. And when you have a high capacity of food, like I do, like we do, then it can enable you to blow through a hell of a lot of food and not necessarily feel that good. And I would say up until this last year and a half has been really where now I can flex between what I want, what I need, and a mixture of the two. And I'm no longer led by, sure, I'll see stuff and I'm like, that looks delicious. Like, I really love to run train on, especially being in Thailand, which is some of my favorite food that I can have, but we haven't eaten out really. And a lot of those times,
let's talk about the reason you said really is because actually the one time we did was because we were caught out timing wise. You needed to help a client there and then, and it was like, by the time we get home, it's going to be really, really late. And what do we do? So the priority for us, help the client.
Yep.
So you did that. And then there was 20, 30 different options there.
Easily.
And at the time, something I speak about a lot on social media and on the podcast, I was struggling with my physique response to the heat, the travel, stress, etc. And I said to Matt, I don't want to eat things that are away from my plan. So we went into a buffet place because we saw they had chicken and a salad bar. Again, we're going to talk about how you flex between it, which is, what you said. But I envisage, because you are a foodie, as am I, that actually, straight away you'd be on the sticky rice, the pad thai, and the stuff that you'd spoken about. But obviously back to you with regards to not doing that right now.
Yeah. And they also had a robot that delivers your starters.
Yeah, I mean, again, something else we'll touch on, memories.
Yeah.
What are we doing around food? Does this lifestyle have to breed, depending on your goal, you living in isolation and tied to numbers? Because I know myself, you've already spoken about that a little bit, how that is to be completely tied into hitting the numbers on the nail. This does serve a purpose, however, never ever saying it doesn't, but then getting to a point where you can flex between it, which you're experiencing now, there's certainly merit to discuss that.
Yeah, 100%. And making memories aspect is a really important factor to talk about. And it's also actually making true memories as opposed to thinking that you're making memories, but actually you're just going hedonistically into choices as well. And that's where separating, and this is what I do touch on with people, is when you're going out, you're not just making memories around the food. The food is a setting. You're going out for some food. But like the robot wasn't really you weren't eating the robot.
No,
it was just funny because I've never seen a robot that delivers, well, it seemed to be made mostly grilled cheese sandwiches that seem to be going out to people.
The funny thing with that is, of course, we've been on an exploration before Thailand, and certainly while we're here around food and what that brings us, was that, for me, I remember what I had because I was sticking to a plan at that time, and it was, pretty close to what I would normally eat. But I don't necessarily remember the palate experience. I don't really remember going, wow, this is delicious. This is what I remember from our time there. It's the robot coming over and serving us food. Me getting told that I can't take lettuce, if you remember now, I forgot about that, because I was putting lettuce in a takeaway bag that I had.
Which was hilarious.
Because at that point, we were trying to actually source our staple foods, and lettuce we were trying to find where we could get it on the reg, and it was like, we've paid for you and we can eat dinner, and I could take some lettuce home for tomorrow's salad.
Which the kitchen staff descended on Sarah.
And we created some memories.
It was
definitely. But it is, isn't it? It's like, for me, certainly, food out, dinners, whatever, it was always, what's the best desirable palate experience? Not necessarily even who I would be with. I'd sometimes feel pressure to do certain things and what have you, and I took part. And actually, when I honestly look at it, I've probably never thought of it like this. I'd actually remember the huge amount of pressure rather than me deciding this is what I want to do, and I'm not living for everyone else or what I maybe think I should do because I'm with, certain people.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people who are listening, and it's where there's merit, not just for the sake of tracking things or being accountable for things, but looking at menus before you go You know that I'm an avid review reader before we go to places, simply because I don't want to have a terrible experience with food. And if you're going to go and pay for something, yeah, you can like refuse to pay, you can have it sent back, but ultimately you want to go there and you just want to enjoy the entire experience. So when you are going, scouting out that there are things on the menu that you can have, and I always say like pick 2 or 3 things that you might want, because often is the case you go there and they're like, oh, we haven't got this, and it's like, well, that's my number 1 pick, and then you're left in this like, well, I don't know what I'd actually have now because I've set my sights on this one thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I find if you have 3, it's like they're generally going to have one of those, and any of those 3 would be top tier. And then you're making your decision without anyone else's influence. And you're also going to think about it from a non-emotional, non-pressured state. So you know what your goal is at that particular time, if you do have one, or you're just going out and enjoying food, in which case then you've completely taken the pressure off. But you also don't have to sift through some menus that are like 85 pages long, and you're like, there's only 2 or 3 things that I like on here, and you can pick those. And I think that ties back into scenarios that I've been in the past where I've taken meals out and I didn't really need to take meals out with me. I could have picked something off the menu and potentially that would have been a little bit more enjoyable. And then there's other scenarios where I should have taken my meal out with me, because when I went there wasn't actually any of the food that I would pick. So then I was either left to not have food, which was less than ideal because then Matt gets hungry, or there was picking something that wasn't necessarily off my choice, or trying to engineer it so that we could just go somewhere else. And then again, that adds to the whole pressure side of things. And some of that pressure is put on yourself, and other pressure is then put on by other people, whether that's right or wrong. That's like a completely different scenario or situation. But over the time of evolving to the point where I'm at now, I feel like I could go into a diet phase tomorrow. I could go into a massing phase. I could be at this point where I'm maintaining right now, and you could take us from Thailand and put us in America. You could put us in Taiwan. You could put us anywhere, and I would be able to hit whatever I needed to hit at any particular moment in time. And then if I wanted to change and pivot and do something different, that would be completely fine. And to be at this point where I'm not emotionally connected to food in a hedonistic way, but I can still appreciate food, and I can still say, no, actually, I would really like to try that. And I can fit it in, or I can factor it in, or I can just go, you know what, it's worth it for me. And I don't feel any guilt. I don't feel any bad feelings towards food or the choices that I make. But on a day-to-day basis, I can autonomously go through the day and go, I'm really grateful for this food. It's absolutely delicious, mainly because you cook it and it is absolutely banging.
Oh, you know. Yeah, no.
But that's a spot that I didn't necessarily ever set my sight on having, because I didn't realize a lot of the things that I had around food that were built in from bringing the awareness in and around food to give that context. Yeah. And then feeling like I'm pigeonholed in, like we could eat low carb, high fat, or, you know, if the scenario dictated, it would be, okay, that's fine. Like I know what I could probably do to make this as much of an enjoyable process as possible. And again, that comes down to, do you enjoy the food that you eat on a day-to-day basis? And that ultimately, in what we're going to talk about with nutrient timing and nutrition, is one of the big underpinning factors for everything. Because if you hate your diet, if you hate the food choices, or if you don't even notice, like I didn't notice with the chicken, rice and broccoli side of things, how these things are actually impacting the grand scheme of my life, like how I'm going to live the rest of the 30, 40, 50, 60 years, that can be quite a big thing to kind of sit and realize.
Yeah, and let's talk about the psychology around when we're going for meals out. I think this is a useful thing that you spoke about there with regards to looking at menus. So there's various different topics under this when we talk about the psychology there. So as a competitor, when I used to look at menus beforehand, it would breed an obsession. It would breed a completely obsessive compulsive as to what I wanted when I went to the meal. And if that wasn't available, it would freak me the fuck out, and I would have a meltdown in my own head. I'd probably go into the toilet, sit on my own, because I'm with, family, normal people, and I wasn't around people that understood that. So I really like your thoughts around having 3 options that you could go with. Now, when you have meals out and you factor this into a bodybuilding lifestyle where you're following a food plan and macros, there's several different ways that we talk to clients about it. And I always quite like to say, okay, so send me the menu. So, you know, whether you're in a diet or a massing phase, whatever it is, it's quite nice for us to have an element of input around meals out, because even when you're massing, okay, yeah, you can go and eat a fuckload of calories and maybe you put it down to, I'm massing, this is off season, this is enjoyment for me. But I'd say that we coach differently, and that's not bashing, you know, if that's what you do with your coach, that's what you do with your coach. However, for us, there's always that importance of gaining that perceived expectation from what the client wants from that meal out. So when I say send me the menu, it's not because, well, I need to know exactly what you're eating. What I then like to do is message back saying, what would you choose from that menu? So that not only gives me an opportunity to learn the client more. So what if they've got a menu of, like you say, 85 items? What would they love to have from that menu? What would be their choice? And I've done, like you said, top 3. What would be the 3 you choose? So then I can say, okay, so these are your choices. Now, what is your expectation and what phase are we in? So if this is in a diet phase and the choices are triple cheese pepperoni pizza, a double bacon burger, and, you know, something along these lines. Okay, yeah. So we're in a diet phase. This is, you know, I can almost guarantee this is what's going to happen. We're going to have a fluctuation of weight. You're on very different food now in a diet phase than you would be if you eat these foods. This could happen to your digestion. This could happen to your mood, your energy levels, etc., etc. And how would you feel the next day having eaten that psychologically? Would you be backtracking thinking, I shouldn't have eaten that? Because really the outcome that we're going to come back with is that's going to add X amount of weeks potentially onto your diet phase, right? You know, having something of that many calories, and we know we can look at a menu and go, right, that's going to be roughly this many calories, or you can put it in MyFitnessPal, whatever. So then the conversation with the client is, this will potentially add a fictitious 2 to 3 weeks onto your diet, which it could be. Also, do these foods ignite that desire to eat more of those foods? Because certainly for me, if I eat something like a pizza, I want something sweet after. So now I'm in a spot where, you know, if I did that, I'd have something like a goo after, a protein goo, right? So it's not a bake on top of a pizza. Also, from previous experiences of being post-show or in off-season, the next day, I don't particularly want to eat my planned food.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, maybe I could be a bit more flexible here. So where does that then go if you don't have the experience and the knowledge around all the different foods and the nutrition that we're talking about today? There's a lot of different elements there. Also, I've got to give a shout out to Annette going away. I mean, it's phenomenal what she's done. We've been coaching now for, you know, a matter of months, and she has a goal. We're in a diet phase. She's traveled a lot with work, and she's made some extremely good decisions around what she's chosen to eat in a corporate setup, in a scenario where there's people there, where, you know, there could be potential from external pressure. There could be, okay, this is the food that's provided for you, this is what you must eat, which we're sort of pigeonholed into often. And she's done her steps, she's done the gym where she can, she's hit her hydration target and everything that she's done. And we've put together the guidelines to go, okay, so this is what you want to look like for a day where you are in corporate meetings, where you are invited for food out. And it's simple things like sauce on the side, etc., etc. But the best part is she said, I feel in control, and I was able to do that. And that is something that comes from all of what we've spoken about before, is you can very easily lose those elements of control because of a multitude of things, from the miseducation, from the fuck it, I'm living in the moment here. We've been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
From the, I'm not in a diet, does it matter? From the, I don't know the health benefits of my food selection. From the whole of your life, what you've been exposed to as a small child. Remember, you don't go and source McDonald's as a 5-year-old, you get taken to McDonald's. And also previous diets you've done. And you mentioned earlier about cult-like behavior. So why is it that Weight Watchers and Slimming World are always full of people doing this type of diet? It's because it's a cult type scenario, because you buy into the community. Again, very similar with If It Fits Your Macros when it went mad. Everyone bought into that. CrossFit, all of the things that you see, but it is, isn't it? You know, it is. You buy into these mythologies. Now, the main, I would say, problem for me with Weight Watchers, Slimming World, whatever it is, there's a lack of education behind their mythologies. I mean, we don't need to go into the mythologies of these types of diets, because it's mind-blowing, actually, when you look at it. You know, if you were to put what they're asking you to do on paper, however, you can end up doing any of these diets, and the likelihood of you going into binge type episodes or hitting the fuck it button after you've been on the holiday you dieted for are extremely high. So for us, utilizing 15 years for you, 12 years for me, 27 years collaborative of what we've learned from doing it wrong, from other people's ideologies, from external pressures, from feeling like shit, from feeling good, all of this is what we're trying to bring out in our clients. And that understanding of whatever phase you're in, there's going to be commitment. And it's not that, it's trying to go that all or nothing, right? It's not all or nothing, which is what you've derived from that reel you posted the other day, and people have responded to that. It's like, I'm an all or nothing person. How many people listening now are going to have this in their ears and go, yeah, I'm pretty all or nothing, hence why I'm a competitor, hence why I'm a bodybuilder. So how do we find that learning of meal timing, of selection of food, of control around food, and be able to flex in phases from an informed position?
I think the informed part of that is the biggest thing. It's what I always like about learning from a multitude of sources and understanding. I've seen this debated around religion before, and like, say, you can take atheists, for example, people who don't believe in anything, but they've read the Bible, they've read the Quran, they've read all of these. And it's very much, when you get into this cult-like behavior around nutrition or, you know, music, as we mentioned, whatever it is, it's, do you understand all of the thought processes that go behind all of the other things as well? So if you know what keto is, and then you have like carnivore diet, and you have a vegetarian diet or the vegan diet, and you have the thought processes that go behind that, it doesn't mean you need to understand from the ground up, but do you understand what that diet entails? And then when you understand all of the multifactorial points of those diets, so what they do well, what they might not do so well, whether any of those points speak to you. And that's the important part, just as it is within training or lifestyle setup. It's like, well, I do quite like eating like these vegetables and these fruits, and they sit really well for me. So I can take that bit from the vegetarian and a plant-based diet, and then out of the higher fat style diets, like, I like these fat sources, so that fits really well for me. And I know that actually having a meal of protein and fat sits really well if I've got my carbohydrates timed around my workouts, and then I know that this can happen there. So you can start to pull these things in and out. And again, it comes down to that understanding of them. And then also, as you said, you know, from childhood, and this is a big thing that obviously we work on with clients, is understanding why you are the way you are around food. Like, my upbringing was very much around, we sat down, we had family meals, but we did have like salads and quiche, and we had like pizza like once a week, like on a Saturday, but it was like bought from like a Sainsbury's or somewhere like that. But then we never had, like, I've never eaten McDonald's out, but that was like a thing that was kind of, I went to parties and I wasn't eating McDonald's with other people, but I'd go to the party. That isn't the same as someone who's been brought up, as you say, like from 5 years old in McDonald's. So therefore, do you actually just have McDonald's imprinted in your mind, and, you know,
as a treat?
You know, people, yeah, it's a treat. It's something that, you know, you do when you're good or you're bad, or you feel happy or you feel sad. And this is the way that you understand around food. But that's certainly something that I'd had before, because when I split my distal bicep tendon and I couldn't train my upper body for 6 months, I found leg training. But outside of that, I was in the gym constantly because I was working as a PT then. But I'd see everyone else and I would look at people training their upper body and be like, oh, I wish I could train my upper body. And even though I could train my lower body, and then eating my food was just like nowhere near as enjoyable because I couldn't progress my physique in the way that I wanted. So
Although
therefore,
you did.
I progressed my legs. Like my legs went from my worst body part to my best body part. Hold tight training them 4 or 5 times a week. Not recommended. But that then turned me into looking at food as more of an emotional crutch. And when I'd worked all day and I'd done like 10, 12 PT sessions and I'd get home, it was easier to order a Domino's pizza or a Papa John's pizza from across the road. And I hadn't had time, or hadn't made time for myself, is actually how it was, to have a break in the day. And then when you're doing that many sessions back to back, imagine like you're sat programming for that amount of time, or you're sat doing something for that amount of time. It's not until you get home and you're like, geez, I'm wiped. So then it was easy to fall into those traps of doing that. And then that build this kind of emotional response that I've had a sick day, but I'm absolutely wiped, or I've had a terrible day because I've been in pain with my arm. Everything else has been a struggle. I tried to pick something up and I strained it or whatever it was. And then it was like food became that. And then because of the PT lifestyle, it was like, well, I can eat in my car in between. And then it was like grabbing convenient stuff because it was harder to cook and do all of these things. And that started to build an emotional response around food. And it wasn't until, like I say, like a year and a half ago that everything just started to be pulled together. And I started to understand like all of these things that had happened, but also be in a better place with my own mental space and physical space, and understand where I stand in the grand scheme of my own physique development journey. But because I understand nutrition to a high degree, and I understand all of those other aspects, I can pull and push different parts. And I know that I don't need to feel bad about food, because food is enjoyable, it's fun, it's tasty. It's there to do a multitude of things, and it can drive fat loss, it can drive muscle gain, it can drive anything, it can build relationships. The reason people eat around a table of food.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like as well, what you said there about like a year and a half ago when things start to become clearer for you, the podcast I did about essentially exploring my own food behaviors from being a competitor for 10 years. And we've spoken about it a lot in regards to why I had certain behaviors and thought processes around food. And you first of all said to me, it would probably be quite weird if you didn't have some element of food behaviors and thoughts and feelings around food after competing back to back for 10 years. I mean, I'm not away from the norm in regards to we all have certain ways as competitors. And I didn't need to feel bad for that anymore, having spent those whole 10 years living with someone that didn't understand it and, would make comments or ask me why I need to be like that because it's off season, or why do you have to have your food hot? Why is it that we only eat at these certain restaurants? And what you've helped me do, and likewise I've helped you do, is we've both talked about it. And then we've both come to this point where it was very focused on my food behaviors and my relationship with food. Consequently, why I did a podcast on it to sort of resonate with the listeners. But then we had that realization that through talking about my certain behaviors, we'd actually spoken about yours as personal anecdote, but you'd addressed a lot of yours along the way with me addressing a lot of mine. And then we both came to this point where it was like, genuinely, like I said to you the other day, didn't I? I don't have cravings. I do not have cravings. I'm just finishing off a menstrual cycle. I say menstrual, not cycle, because we might get that confused. But I don't have any inclination to eat right now anything other than my normal foods. And we speak about it a lot. The amount of enjoyment I get from my 4 meals a day is pretty nuts. But there's also a level
nuts in there as well.
There's nuts in there now. We're looking at the healthy fats. But there's also a level of I sit down, we've got it now where we've factored it in and scheduled in our day, and this will lead nicely into meal timings, where I sit down and I'm very grateful for the foods and the opportunity to have fresh produce, to enjoy what I'm eating, a variety of foods across my diet. And I've personally, throughout my bodybuilding, built behaviors where I wasn't doing that. Food was timed because it was for bodybuilding. Foods were the foods that I felt I should eat. Foods were always factored around pushing up or pulling down. And we're both in this maintenance phase where it's actually like we're eating the same foods every day. You know, it might be that we have a different type of lettuce, or some days we might have a different type of nut. But other than that, you know, it's pretty much the same foods every day. And you flex around things a little bit more as well in regards to you being male and a, you know, bigger body weight. So you can have more food than me, for sure. And what we've realized is that the main reason behind us not going for a meal out yet, we don't really want to.
No, don't. It's not a conscious thought.
We're actually so settled in. I mean, we are homely people. We like to just be together all the time and do our thing. And right now, the thought of, you know, getting ready, going for a meal, being in a foreign country and having to try and communicate how I like my food done, right now I don't want to do that. Now, that's not saying we're never going to go for a meal out here, but I've personally never been in a spot where I'm this happy with food. I don't have food obsessions. I don't count my green beans. I did when we first got here. I was still doing that. There was still a few behaviors that I had. But, you know, I've never been in this spot with food. And what I speak about today relates to the Why Do I Feel Like This post-show podcast, which will be going live this month, where actually a lot of the thoughts and feelings around foods were from that pressured point of view by many different things. And what we've actually sculpted now is our lifestyle. We eat at pretty much the same time every day. So perhaps we could talk about why we do that. Why is bodybuilding normally associated with eating certain meals at certain times throughout the day? I mean, I like it. You know, I like it.
I do know you like it.
You're less, you know, you like it more now that we've established it, because actually we had that conversation and I was like, well, really my human needs, which we spoke about, both of our human needs, what's our hierarchy of needs? I would like to eat my 4 meals a day around the same time every day. And that is, of course, from bodybuilding. This wasn't before bodybuilding. This definitely wasn't before bodybuilding. So for me, some of the points that I would talk about with meal timings are, of course, the bodybuilding optimization would be to have that protein feed in every 3 to 5 hours or 2 to 4, depending on, you know, what your coach says and what you read. It would be to have micronutrients present at each meal. It would be to time your carbohydrates around your workout, ideally. It would be to maintain a good energy level throughout the day, and to, for me, keep my hunger in a good spot. Because if I go too long, if I've trained in particular, and at the moment I'm training 6 times a week, I feel like I need to eat. Now, what does that then, like we've said already, when I then get to eat, if it is pushed along too much and we've, you know, we're both a bit like, whoa, we actually feel a bit hyper, whatever one we want to call it, I actually sit down and I eat my meal without thinking about it. So that was another big reason for me for meal timing. So I think for us personally, meal timing is a bit more of a mindset thing.
Yeah, for sure. And the big thing with anything, like you talk about nutrient timing being a similar way as to days training per week. So how many meals you're going to have is how many training sessions you're going to have. And the big thing is going to be, what can you stick to? Like we can stick to 4 times per day and we can afford to have those moved around because we command our own diary and our own schedule.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a big thing. So if you work from home, work from a laptop, you can have your break whenever you can. And one of the things that forced me into being more flexible with food was the previous job that I did. My work could be like eating a bit of food and then carrying it over a little bit. But as long as I got my meals in before I went to go train, that was cool. And it could kind of flex in there. So a big one is going to be can you get in that consistently? And because that will ultimately lead to you feeling like you've been defeated before you've even started. If you say, I need to eat 5 times a day and you can only do 3, in which case do 3. But then you can be smart with a 4th one that you can have. You know, it can be a shake, it can be something that's like snack based or something there. But if you're looking to maximize, and we're looking at nutrient time, and we're looking at why you're doing this, as you said, optimizing a bodybuilding side of things, you're looking to maximize either your fat loss, or you're looking to maximize your muscle gain,
or retain the muscle you have in a maintenance phase.
Yeah, so you're falling into one of those 3 camps. So therefore, ultimately, a minimum amount of meals per day should be 3. And if you're dipping below that, then having an additional protein feed in there.
Like a shake in the middle or something.
Yeah, for sure. Like one of my clients just checked in, and he's essentially fasting from like 7 in the morning till like 4 or 5 p.m. because he can't get anything else in because he's on the go for all that time. But moderate meal in the morning, large meal of an evening, and then protein shake / fruit if and where you can grab it in between. Is it ideal? No. But is it avoidable? No, not right now. And therefore, we also have a B rotation of workouts that are working more on mobility because he's standing more. So therefore, offsetting a lot of the inflammation that's going through, offsetting a lot of the movement patterns that are going through. So that's a good example of someone who can right now on this week's rotation afford to do 4 meals a day or 5 meals a day. But if you're looking to be a bodybuilder, it is ultimately a thought process, or you are a bodybuilder, it is a thought process to maximize the amount. Now, slightly better than 3 feedings a day is 4, slightly better is 5. And I would say 6 is potentially unnecessary unless you have the time availability and it's not costing you sleep to do so. One of the things that I've seen still people do is wake up and have a protein shake. And it makes absolutely no sense. And I will argue that until I'm blue in the face. My face is a little bit black, so that could be quite blue.
What are you talking about with the tattoo?
My head tattoo on my beard.
The beard things.
Yeah. So waking up and having a protein shake is not a good idea because, especially if you're natural, sleep is, aside from food, the most anabolic thing that you're going to have in your arsenal. So disrupting that, where you could just have a bigger protein feeding before bed, would be more beneficial. And if you're assisted, sleep is still very, very important, and still one of the most anabolic things that you're not injecting your body with or taking as a tablet form. And then that leads into the conversation, I guess, in terms of nutrient time before bed. So
I feel it's individual.
It is individual, for sure. However, there is the majority of information. And again, this is going to, a lot of this, and this is what people also need to take into consideration, is a lot of the numbers. Yes, you can have your grams per kilo of body weight that you should be, so 0.4, 0.5 grams per kilo of body weight for protein.
I feel like it's not like that anymore,
yeah.
But yeah.
It's still a lot of the research, a lot of the stuff that's put out, and people are given these frameworks. But what you also need to take into consideration is your size, your activity level, your body composition. So again, these things need to be taken into consideration. And
your age.
Yeah, for sure. Well, certainly for protein.
Yeah.
Because protein needs to increase as you get older, past the point of, I would say, mid-40s, 50s, and then that needs to be accelerated the further 50, 60, 70, 80. That needs to go along. But in terms of the pre-bed window, having a large bolus of protein, carbohydrates, fats, a bigger meal can, for a large degree of people, disrupt sleep. Now, for you, obviously, it's the opposite.
This is why I say it's individual.
So talk about your experience.
And some clients.
Yeah.
You know, I do have clients that ask this question. Now, I actually was part of like a group Zoom in COVID, and it was like a bodybuilding type, it was like a forum setup, and they spoke about pre-bed meal, and it was to allow at least 2 hours before you go to bed. And me being me, straight away that night was, I'm going to allow 2 hours before bed. For me, I feel personally, and we've spoken about this, that our digestion is quite quick, our turnover.
Yeah, I can eat and train as well.
Yeah, I
very
can.
quickly.
And some people
don't feel
can't.
sick.
I never ever feel sick, even at the height of off season.
Yeah, and even when I'm slamming legs and pushing like 0 reps in reserve, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna be sick.
And I think we've personally come to the decision that we digest pretty quickly. And I feel this for bed. So for me, 2 hours before bed, I would go to bed hungry, or I'd feel like I'm ready to eat again. You know, there's of course different opinions around what hunger actually feels like, so we won't go down that rabbit hole. We could probably do a whole podcast on that. However, I then am thinking about food before I go to bed, and my desire to eat is higher because I'm thinking, well, normally I eat every 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours, so I could be eating in 1 hour. I'd then lay there thinking about, well, I'm hungry. That doesn't facilitate restful thoughts for me.
No.
And I also feel like for me, because I do a large portion of fasted activity in the morning, and that's been for a long period of time, even lending itself to a prep, right? So I would live on like a protein goo. So I'd do steps in the morning, have a goo, go and train legs for 2 hours, walk home, and then have, it might be a salad or some chicken and veg. So if I backloaded my carbohydrates to before bed, that also facilitates me having that fasted activity in the morning and feeling like I've had a good portion of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins before bed. And it actually helps me sleep. Now, we do allow 30 to 45 minutes before we go to sleep. And we've got into a routine of, you know, we'll cuddle for a bit and be wet blankets. I'm sure everyone needs to know that on the podcast. But we have that us time. We eat, we have some us time, you know, relaxing, watching something on TV with the blue light blockers on.
For one of us.
And then, yeah, for
I'm
me,
a bit of a rebel.
I don't know if you know, but I'm a bodybuilder. And then you know, we go to bed. So for me, that's the thought process, because this is where it's individual. So I said that from a selfish point of view as such, but this actually transfers to clients as well that I've worked with, that they find it works better for them to eat, you know, perhaps an hour before bed and going straight to bed after the last meal. Now, particularly in diet phase, when you're raging fucking hungry, you know, you've got to think of the principles that work for you. Now, let's talk about what optimizing nutrition is. So optimizing nutrition, in my mind, and I know you share this view, is what is optimal for the individual. So we can all read a book and go, wow, I'm going to do that. But if it doesn't fit your schedule, which you've spoken about, if it makes you feel a strain on your mental health, if you feel pressure, if you do not like what you are doing day in, day out, then does that lead to adherence and you enjoying your life and having life beyond potentially, if we say, a diet phase? I personally have had experience from diets into off-season several times, and what I can tell you is I ended up gaining a lot of those food behaviors that didn't lead to me truly, you know, getting the most from this journey. Now, I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, because I did, but now I can realize I don't need to be stepping on stage to have validation in life. I don't need to, you know, feel like I have to eat what every other bodybuilder eats on Instagram to have validation, because when you meet those people in real life, they often don't eat those foods. I'm just going to put it out there.
Very true.
Well, you know, most people that I have on the podcast, most of the guests say, people put it on Instagram, they don't behave like that in real life. And this is where you do have that confusion around, you have a snippet come up saying, if you eat this food, then this happens. Well, does that definitely happen to you as a person? You know,
No.
do you definitely get this result if you do this in conjunction with what you eat? There's that guy that you called out on your story who said about those protein pancakes or something.
Oh, the client sent to me.
Well, let's talk about that example.
Well, yeah, so one of my clients was dieting, and he basically sent me over this video, and it was, who name him?
A guy.
A guy. Let's call him Guy.
Let's keep it sensible. People
So,
might be listening to this in the watershed window.
Watershed window. So he basically was making these protein pancakes, and it was made with a variety of different syrups and sauces. And he attributed this to a substantial amount of weight loss, and he substantiated it by saying, eating these allowed me to lose X amount of weight. Now, this person clearly, and I know for a fact, takes gear and takes quite a substantial amount of gear. And this is what gave him the physique that he was looking for, and no doubt the fat burners and everything else that he was using for that point is really why he saw the results that he did. Now, that then becomes misleading, it becomes dishonest. And when I did call him out about it, he blocked me and didn't respond. But other people saw the story and said they know who this guy is. And I also know who this guy was coached by. And let's just say it was the anabolics and not the anabolic pancakes. And this is what I find upsetting about people who don't talk about their steroid use or don't talk about them. And then they're jacked, vascular, diced, and then they use words that mislead and are disingenuous. Because let me tell you, from someone who's been not assisted to assisted, the difference is night and day. I'll use an example because when I finished my photo shoot diet and I went assisted and then I went to Mexico, I put on 19 pounds in 2 weeks when I was there, and I put away a substantial amount of food. And when I came back, 7 pounds fell off, 12 pounds stayed, and there might have been 1 or 2 pounds of that was body fat. So when you take that into consideration,
if someone who's not assisted put on 19 pounds, it would look very differently.
If I did that whilst I was away before, I would have come back not far off probably the condition I started my
6 months,
my 6 month diet phase on. And this is why I think things like that, and that is also something that will change what you do around your nutrient timing, because nutrient timing for people who are natural is important around the workout window,
but also for assisted, if you're using something like insulin.
Exactly. And that's the point, is there are compounds that you will use that means that something like nutrient timing becomes vastly more important than someone who isn't being assisted. And that's not to say that it's not important, it just means different. That you just turn the level up in terms of importance. It's like, depending again on your genetic interindividuality. If you're a genetic freak, how much does nutrient timing matter? Yeah, it still matters because you'll get the edge over the other people. But if you're really sort of like myself when I started and really struggle to put on muscle mass and gain, it becomes more important because you need to have more of the things that are going to give you 10%, 5%, 1%, 2%, and chase those things up.
There's also that merit around, with PED use and things like meal timings around, if you're going to use, like I use growth and L-cart in the morning for the fat loss benefits.
Yep.
So you'd want to be fasted for at least around 90 minutes to gain the full effect of that. So you then look at, okay, so I get up at X time and I'm going to eat meal 1 at X time. Then what do your meals look like for the rest of the day if we're eating 3 to 5 hours apart? And when we look at, like you touched on there about transparency around PED use, also with the female side of the sport, and of course it's a driver for the podcast as well to increase the education, but also the education around that genetic individuality, which you've just touched on there, if you are aspiring to certain physiques. But also, if you see that certain people are posting how many calories they're smashing and what they're doing, which is what I've seen at shows as well, right? Particularly competing internationally, all of the athletes go to the same places after to eat their food after the show. And I remember at Miss Universe, I'm sitting there with the Mr. and Mrs. Universes. The guys were fucking humongous. We're talking beasts, incredible to be around. But there was also girls of a more muscular nature that were, phenomenal physiques, phenomenal athletes. They can eat a lot more than me. and tolerate a lot more than me, potentially tying into their PED use, their genetics, how long they've been doing the sport for. And, you know, for me to then sit there as the little bikini girl, I can then feel like, well, I'll do that as well, because we both won Miss Universe in different categories. So that would mean, do you see what I'm saying? So if I'm a bikini girl and I see another bikini girl when I was natural that's assisted, and she's in off season eating 3,500 calories a day, but I'm only eating 2,000 calories a day, that could lead to me thinking, well, why isn't my coach saying I could eat more? Why is she getting away with it? There's PEDs involved. And that, for me, it's a personal thing to me, because I was that natty that felt like, wow, these people must be better than me because they're eating more than me. But we're both in off season, we're both bikini category. You know, and I had conversations with Stephen, etc., as you know, to talk about this and understand it more. But, you know, because it is from that personal spot of, like you said, you found it hard to gain muscle. So there's certain people you would look at on Instagram and it makes you feel a lesser of an athlete or a person. And there's certain times where you have to pull back on your diet, even if you're in an off season, to facilitate the bigger picture of your off season, of your progression as an athlete. Whereas there might be someone at the same timeline as you that competed X amount of time ago, same as you. They're flying. But there could be something like PEDs there, which you're not using, and that could have a dramatic impact there. And it certainly is, you know, I like to talk about this because I hope that at times people listen and they go, okay, maybe, you know, I'm going to think about what I share, because who is watching that? And what was a great example for me, Rimini, who listens, came on the pod, and she's 5 foot something. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get it wrong. And her off-season calories were, when we did the pod, they were getting up to around 2-3. I think that's what she said was around her max, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And at the time I was on, you know, nearly 4,000. So the main thing is I'm taller. I'd come off the back of a prep, right? And we know that prep was pretty savage. So my tolerance of food for quite some time was very high. And that was getting food in. And when you're eating nearly, you know, 4,000 calories on the daily, it's very different. It's hard in a different way to what maybe a prep brings. And that was a great example. Now, Rimini's also natural. So that's giving you that example of actually, you know, it is so individual. And I think sometimes what our main point of conversation here is, hopefully, if you've got a coach, you can listen to them and try not to be strayed too much to other people's mythologies or idealistic approaches. If you're following something, you know, a coach has devised a plan for you, really, do you want to be doing, you know, something from someone else and so not listening to your coach, and what's that going to bring, you know?
Yeah, and I think I saw a great comparison between two heavyweight bodybuilders. One was consuming 7,000 calories a day, and one was consuming just over 3,500 calories a day.
Yeah.
They were about like 5 pounds away in body weight.
Yeah.
But they were both ridiculously jacked, both assisted, both doing those things. And it's like, that's almost double the amount of calories.
It's an individual response.
Person. And that's the point, is you can look at what other people do. You can maybe learn why they do what they do. But if you have a set calorie amount that you want to be eating, and it might look cool to eat 7,000 calories a day, or it might look cool to eat 4,000 calories a day, but when it's every single day, and this comes back to that point about, can you do it?
Yeah.
And I have this with clients who go through massing phases, and they get up to, and a spot seems to be like 3.5 for a guy, 3.5 to 4.
And this is every day over time.
Exactly. That's 7 days a week.
First of all, it's like, bloody hell.
Yeah. And if you're massing, then it's 365 days. And then that's not, it doesn't matter if you're ill, like if you've got like busy times that come up. These are all times that you have to be getting that food in if you want to grow. Yeah.
And let's look at a top level athlete. They can't miss a beat.
Yeah. And so actually, I would argue that being on almost lower food than that top end makes it a lot easier for you to get that consistently in. And there's also merit in remembering that you only need a small to moderate surplus to drive maximal anabolism. And if you're trying to overshoot that for the sake of eating more calories, because you're like, I want to eat more food, and you are a competitive athlete, or you do have body composition goals in mind, you're adding more fat than is potentially necessary, and therefore you're elongating a diet phase or shortening your window of massing. And that is something that, again, your physique is only progressing from where it was the last time you were lean in the massing phase. And
because what weight you put on, you've got to lose again if you're a competitor.
Yeah, or even if you're dieting for physique-based aspirations as well.
But as in to get back to a certain stage look, you know, if you're competing multiple times, it's like what you gain in that off season, that's got to come back off. And if you're looking to progress and potentially bring more condition, which most people do ordinarily over their bodybuilding, it's like, so that weight's got to come off plus some.
Yeah.
So then pushing it for the sake of pushing it, which is basically what you're saying, you know, you're the one that's going to have to diet harder or longer to get that off.
And that's the point. That's not to put people off gaining weight.
No.
It's to drive the focus on you're gaining muscle.
Yeah.
And fat gain will come along with it. But the key here is don't fixate on what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Fixate on what you need, your caloric balance, your caloric needs. And remember that those things will change and shift based upon how much muscle mass you have, how active you are, how shredded you got in your competitive season, or wherever it was, the compounds that you use, the foods, even the nutrient timing, the good quality sleep, rest, recovery, all of those things that you have that'll have positive changes in your body composition that you want to be mindfully implemented. But do think about the calories that you may desire to be on, or the food that you desire to consume, versus if you know that you're going to compete again, what is that really going to be doing for your progress as an athlete? And if the answer is just giving you excess body fat to diet off, do you want to diet off? And then it comes a question of, cool, like I'm good to diet. I'm fine to spend that additional time. And if you've already dieted for a competition,
and you want to have a bit of time, you might want to have a bit of time, right, as well. Again, this is individual.
Anyone Google Lee Priest?
Yeah. I don't Google Lee Priest in regards to post-show. But like you said with Mexico, and
it was worth every pound.
Yeah, because you made an informed decision.
100%.
This holiday, I'm spending a lot of money. I haven't had a holiday for a long period of time, and I want to go away, and I want to eat what I want to eat, and I want to eat to desire. However, what's great about that scenario is that you have the education already, you still would have made some choices while you're there to facilitate not going completely apeshit.
Oh, I got up in the morning, I trained before the buffet was open, I did some steps before the buffet was open. Every day was about 15 to 19k steps. And then after the buffet dinner, there was some digestion steps that needed to take place because Matt went all in. But
at that time,
train every single day.
Yeah, and you know, that's not me saying right, that's what everyone needs to do after a diet or a show or whatever.
No, I would advise against.
But also you've done it and learned from it. So what's great is that you could actually do it.
Yeah.
Utilize the education to have what you want, what you felt you wanted at the time, but still maintain the fundamentals of bodybuilding. But what that also did for you was it gave you some space after your diet, which I describe it as almost like a comp prep. You know, you were probably 4 to 6 weeks out from a show. So you brought a level of condition. At that time, you felt like you needed to do that. If you asked us if we wanted to do that now, and I can hand on heart say, if and when I do another prep, I don't feel like I'd ever behave like I have in previous preps. So what do I then learn moving forward as a competitor? What I'd like to do post-show is different from previous seasons. Now, the best part I feel to our coaching and what we can then offer clients is this is what happens if you do this. Do you want to do that? Do you want to add time onto your diet or your prep? And potentially this is how you may feel off the back of eating certain foods or behaving in a certain way. we have conversations with them. This isn't us saying, this is what's going to happen, don't do it. It's, this is what's going to happen. How about we meet somewhere where it's like, okay, so why don't you have a dinner on that day and the other 2 meals are a bit lower? Or, you know, it's planning and talking about what the outcome is going to be and what we can do to work together to offer that satisfaction, because we're not here saying, look, you're never going to fuck up. Do you know what I mean? And what is fucking up really? There's always this talk of optimization as a bodybuilder and, you know, doing what bodybuilders should do. But does that mean that when we see the majority of bodybuilders post-show eating till capacity, is that okay because it's post-show? But the rest of the time, you've got to eat chicken and rice. It doesn't really make sense when you talk about it. But what I would say is, this is a learning experience. This is a journey, and this is adaptable to you. And there can be enjoyment in every single phase. I spoke about this on the pod that's going live today, that you can even enjoy when you're in the depths of prep, because it's cathartic enjoyment, right? So in every phase, there is an element of enjoyment, but it's different as to what the goal is. And like Matt said at the start, you know, we both have a capacity for food, and I'd say we both enjoy food. But what we've certainly realised is that actually the memories and, you know, having fun as bodybuilders has come back a lot for us. Certainly for you, you know, you said to me, which was very, very cute. I have to call you cute on every opportunity.
It's true.
Where you said you've helped teach me how to enjoy bodybuilding again.
Yeah, for sure.
And right back at the start, we started with your, you know, a summary of your story to get where you are today in regards to being more flexible around nutrition. Maybe we could finish off with you talking about right now. I'll put you on the spot.
Oh.
What would you say the next 6 months looks like for you right now, with how you feel about your physique, with how you feel about adapting, doing less of the gym and doing combat school? How does your nutrition look at the moment? Is it what we're doing on the daily at the moment? You probably haven't had much thought into it because we're living very much in the present moment, but how do you feel about nutrition right now? What would be a word?
Content.
Okay. So that's giving you insight as the listeners. Matt's bodybuilded for 15 years. He's followed food plans, he's tracked, he's done diets, he's done massing, all of which brought about a mixture of feelings, thoughts and feelings. Now, if you're listening, if I ask you that question, how do you feel about nutrition, or how do you feel about food? Would your response be a word like content? Because what does content mean? It means I'm happy, I'm comfortable, and I feel really good about this.
Yeah, it wouldn't change anything about what I do, and if it came down to doing this every day, then yeah, cool. And like I say, if we moved, there would be no stress around, oh, I think, I wonder if I'll be able to get this there.
As long as we can find some lettuce for me.
Yeah. But then we could always just grow our own lettuce gene, and we can get hydroponics set up. We could genetically engineer, probably print one by now. We just print you some lettuce. Be absolutely fine.
But what a revelation. I mean,
yeah, and with the physique training side of stuff, my main side of that is to still push the needle of my physique, but steadily over time. So I still want to get stronger in the gym where I am there, but I want to unleash more of the skill acquisition through combat, MMA, whatever you want to call it.
Fitness as well. That
will increase my fitness, which is something I've neglected over time. But for me personally, and again, this is the enjoyment factor that we spoke about nutrition, cardio and sitting on a bike or sitting on a cross trainer or whatever, it ain't going to happen. I'm just not going to do it. I'm definitely not going for a run. Like, I might cycle on a bike, test. But that is, you know, the upper echelon of doing that. For me, something like ice skating, snowboarding, the heat probably negates most of that here. But then doing something like fighting, for me, I don't think about it as cardio. My lungs do, but I'm actively in there. And when you're going to be punched or kicked, you're less thinking about your lungs being on fire and more about defending yourself. So that is really going to push, in my mind, my body composition in a different way, unlock new levels of mobility, coordination. I'm cognizant of the fact of having my brain health in a good spot. So therefore having something that makes me think more than necessarily moving weight from A to B, which is, you have to be present, but I've done it for so long that it's almost autonomous now to make sure that everything's bang on. So more so now the spectrum of not just gaining the maximal amount of muscle mass, but maybe gaining the maximal amount of life experience, enjoyment, because food is in a good place, sleep is in a good place, have you, which is beautiful. And just everything else now is like, well, now my health needs to take a priority in terms of mobility, movement, and everything else, and then nutrition can flex. But yeah, a revelation.
What a great way to summarize the podcast. And if people are listening and this resonates, you know, that perhaps you'd like to be able to facilitate the knowledge from nutrition, but like you call it, flex between different phases or different goals, and have that education behind your decisions, you know, being a bit more informed, being able to utilize what you're learning to live life at the same time. And then when it comes to it, you know, if you do enter a diet phase or something that's got more of a focus, being able to switch that on, again, with the education behind it, then we are coaches that answer questions. And this is something we often get asked about, isn't it? You know, I had a lady, her Instagram handle was Flea Story. Flea Story. Hey, Flea, that ties into my Flea. Don't worry about that one, guys. We'll tell you about that another day. Yeah. Asking about, you know, if you're coachable, you know, should you ask questions? If you haven't got on with certain coaches, is that you or is that them? And a lot of people recently have messaged a similar thing to say, you know, I get a bit worried about asking questions. So we certainly take that with priority, because we are both question askers. And there's certainly a difference between asking questions through learning about what you're doing day in, day out, or questioning what your coach is saying. There is a difference there. So we are always open to talking to people, jumping on consultations, or if we can help, spread the word even. And if you found this episode useful, if you want to share it with anyone that's looking at nutrition more and it may offer them some inspiration, then we would love to see it. So Matt's Instagram handle has recently changed. Everyone knows my Instagram handle. Let's sign it out with your new Instagram handle.
I feel like, seeing as it is entitled within the pod, you should.
And welcome back to @Matt Beyond Condition Coaching.
Oh.
And of course, thank you to Matt. I know we live together. We are always together, but it is still very nice for me to have you on the podcast, and it is still your time. So I'm very grateful, and I'm sure the listeners will love our rambles today. And we hope to hear from some of you very, very soon. Goodbye, guys. I will see you or speak to you next week.
Goodbye, guys.